Dear friends, sometimes Thomas and Percy both think they are the most important engines on the branch line. We know better, of course, and so does the Fat Controller, which is why he did not intervene when Thomas and Percy had a quarrel. Like most quarrels, it wasn't serious to start with. It began when Percy... But why not turn the page and read about it for yourself? The author.
It was a beautiful morning on the island of Sodor. Thomas the Tank Engine's blue paint sparkled in the sunshine as he puffed happily along his branch line with Annie and Clarabelle. He was feeling very pleased with himself. "Hello, Thomas," whistled Percy. "You look splendid." "Yes, indeed," boasted Thomas. "Blue is the only proper colour for an engine." "Oh, I don't know. I like my brown paint," said Toby. "I've always been green. I wouldn't want to be any other colour either," added Percy. Well, anyway, huffed Thomas, "blue is the only colour for a really useful engine. Everyone knows that." Percy said no more. He just grinned at Toby. Later, Thomas was resting when Percy arrived. A large hopper was loading his trucks full of coal. Thomas was still being cheeky. "Careful," he warned. "Watch out with those silly trucks." Go on, muttered the truck. "And by the way," went on Thomas, "those bumpers don't look very safe to me." The last load poured down. "Help! I'm choking!" cried Thomas. "Get me out!" Percy was worried, but he couldn't help laughing. Thomas's smart blue paint was covered in coal dust from smoke box to bunker. "Ha ha!" chuckled Percy. "You don't look really useful now, Thomas. You look really disgraceful." "I'm not disgraceful," choked Thomas. "You did that on purpose. Get me out!" It took so long to clean Thomas that he wasn't in time for his next train. Toby had to take Annie and Clarabelle. "Poor Thomas," whispered Annie to Clarabelle. They were most upset. Thomas was grumpy in the shed that night. Toby thought it a great joke, but Percy was cross with Thomas for thinking he had made his paint dirty on purpose. Fancy a really useful blue engine like Thomas becoming a disgrace to the Fat Controller's railway. Next day, Thomas was feeling more cheerful as he watched Percy bring his trucks from the junction. The trucks were heavy and Percy was tired. "Have a drink," said his driver, "then you'll feel better." The water column stood at the end of the siding with the unsafe buffers. Suddenly, Percy found that he couldn't stop. The buffers didn't stop him either. "Oh!" wailed Percy. "Help!" The buffers were broken and Percy was wheel-deep in coal. It was time for Thomas to leave. He had seen everything. "Now Percy has learned his lesson too," he chuckled to himself. That night, the two engines made up their quarrel. "I didn't cause your accident on purpose, Thomas," whispered Percy. "You do know that, don't you?" "Of course," replied Thomas, "and I'm sorry I was cheeky. Your green paint looks splendid again, too. In future, we'll both be more careful of coal." Thomas the tank engine was ill. Workmen had tried to make him better, but it was no use. "Edward must take you to the works," said Sir Topham Hatt. Thomas felt very miserable. Then Sir Topham Hatt spoke to Duck. "I want you to help Percy and Toby while Thomas is away." Duck was delighted. He already knew Percy and soon made friends with Toby and Bertie. Terence the tractor gave him a big welcome too. "Take care of Thomas's coaches," he advised. "He's sure to miss them while he's away." Duck was very gentle with the coaches. Annie and Clarabel were impressed. "Such nice manners," they told each other. "It really is a pleasure to go out with him." When Thomas came back, Annie and Clarabel told him how well Duck had managed. Thomas was so pleased to be home that he soon forgot to be jealous. The works had left Thomas's handbrake very stiff. It made his brakes seem as if they were hard on, when in fact they were not. As a result, he and his coaches often overran the platform. Thomas found this most embarrassing. Gradually, his driver and fireman learned to be extra careful. But one day, Thomas's fireman was ill, and a relief man took his place. The fireman had fastened the coupling and joined the driver and station master on the platform to wait for Henry's passengers. The fireman had forgotten all about Thomas's handbrake. Thomas simmered happily. Not long now, he thought, as he saw Henry slowly approaching. But Thomas's brakes were not hard on, and suddenly he felt his wheels begin to move. He tried to stop, but he couldn't without his driver and fireman. He tried to whistle a warning, but he couldn't do that either. The conductor, driver, fireman and passengers were all stranded on the platform. "Stop! Stop!" shrieked Annie and Clarabel. But Thomas, with plenty of steam, kept on going. The alarm went out down the line. "Stop the runaway!" There, ready for action, was Harold the helicopter. The inspector had made a plan, and together they took off into the sky. At last Thomas was tiring. "I need to stop, I need to stop," he panted wearily. As they neared the next station, Thomas saw Harold land. They entered the platform slowly enough for the inspector to act. Judging his moment, the inspector scrambled into the cab and screwed the brake hard on. At last, Thomas stopped. Both he and the inspector were very relieved. Then they thanked Harold. "Think nothing of it." "Well, Harold, glad to be of service any time." "Phew," remarked the inspector. "You must never let this happen again, Thomas." Wearily, Thomas agreed with him. The engines were finding life difficult. Workmen were mending the viaduct on the main line. The arches needed strengthening. Sir Topham Hatt did not want to close the railway while the work was done, and so repairs took a long time. Had to take great care when crossing the viaduct, and the delay often made them late on their journey to the junction, where they knew Thomas would be ready to collect his passengers. Thomas grew crosser and crosser. "Time's time," he grumbled. "Why should I keep my passengers waiting while Henry and James dawdle about all day on viaducts?" "Don't blame me," snorted Henry. "If we hurried across the viaduct, it might collapse, and then you'd have no passengers at all. What would you do then?" "Run my train on time for one thing," retorted Thomas. He hurried away before Henry could answer. Bertie was impatient too. He was timed to arrive just after Thomas. His passengers found that instead of going straight from the bus to their train, they were kept waiting till Thomas arrived. Soon Bertie grew cross with Thomas. "Late again," he remarked, as Thomas panted wearily in. "We may be friends, but I thought you could go fast, Thomas. It's time we had another race. I reckon I could beat you now." Thomas let off steam loudly. "Rubbish," he hissed fiercely. "It's those main-line engines. They dither about on the viaduct and then blame Sir Topham Hatt's workmen. It's just an excuse for laziness, if you ask me." One day, James was later than ever at the junction. "I'm sorry, Thomas," he puffed. "I was held up at the station, and the viaduct made it worse." "It's lucky for you I'm a guaranteed connection," grumbled Thomas. Before James could answer, he puffed importantly away. Come along," he panted to the coaches. Annie and Clarabelle did their best, but Thomas soon found that he couldn't save much time. Suddenly, Thomas saw Bertie ahead. His radiator was steaming. "What's the matter?" asked Thomas. "You should be at the station by now. You're late." "I feel dreadful," moaned Bertie. "All upset inside, and driver says he can't make me better." "Thank goodness you're late too. Can you take my passengers, please? They'll never get home otherwise." "Of course," agreed Thomas. He now felt sorry for Bertie and promised to get help at the next station. Thomas set off again. Already he felt much more cheerful, and Bertie's passengers, travelling in Annie and Clarabelle, all reached home safely. When Bertie was better, he came to thank Thomas. "I'm sorry I teased you about being late," he said. "That's all right," said Thomas. "I'm glad I could help. There are times when being late isn't such a bad thing after all." With a last cheerful greeting, the two friends went back to work.
On evening on the Iron Sodor, Percy was taking some trucks from the docks. He was working so hard that he was proud of that. He was thinking about what he will say when he sees Thomas and Toby in the shed about his day, that he wasn't paying attention on the tracks. But when he did, he could see a broken tree was on the line. He put on his brakes, but it was too late. He ran over the tree and it hit his smoke box. told Toby about what happened. Thomas couldn't help but laugh at what he just heard.
Oh, Percy! How did you get so distracted? Besides, it wasn't the tree's fault that it was in the middle of the track.
So, you're saying it's my fault?
Pretty much. Maybe next time you should keep a better lookout. Oh boy, here we go again.
Ha! Maybe I should stop talking to you for the rest of the night.
Well, sure, go right ahead. I have zero patience with you right now anyway.
So they stayed silent for the rest of the night. When morning came, Percy still didn't talk to Thomas. He was talking to Toby instead.
So, Toby, what's a drip?
Well, it's when rain comes through a hole and over your cab and your fireman doesn't have any time to fix it.
Well, that's probably the silliest thing I've ever heard yet. One time I heard someone calling his name that. I know that he can't come through a hole and come over my cab.
That's different, Percy. He probably thinks that his friend is a coward or being silly or even being a spoiled brat.
Percy thought about what Thomas said and decided to ask him a question.
So, if you stop me from doing things from being nice, would that make you a drip, Thomas?
You know what? You're a drip. Now, if you excuse me, I have passengers to take.
Percy felt assaulted. He was determined to pay Thomas out. Later, Thomas was puffing on his branch line with his two coaches. Everything was just fine when all of a sudden, something hit his left foreleg, and a loud bang was heard.
Ow!
Shouted Thomas and came to a stop. When he did, he could feel a cold stream of water running down his wheels. His driver took a look at it, then explained it to him. One of your side rods is broken. It swung up and hit your tank. I'll have to go find help. Meanwhile, Percy was shunting some freight cars when all of a sudden, the station master ran up to them.
Leave both trucks there, Percy. I just got a call that Thomas got a hole in his water tank. There's water dripping everywhere, and he can't get home on his own.
Percy didn't like the sound of that because of what Thomas called him this morning.
Me? I'm not going to help him. He called me a drip, so he can go drip himself over there.
Well, Percy, where'd that come from?
You really want to know?
Never mind. Anyway, what about Annie and Clarabelle and the passengers? Do they deserve to stay overnight?
Well, if that's the case, then sure.
Percy!
Okay, I'm going. Jeez.
He soon found Thomas at the tunnel. The passengers were glad to see him, and so were Annie and Clarabelle. Thomas could see the anger Percy had in his eyes, so he knew that he had to apologize.
I'm sorry I was rude to you. I shouldn't have said those things to you. That tank of mine turned me into a bigger drip than we expected, didn't it? Can we be best friends again, please?
Apology accepted, Thomas. Now, let's get you to the steamworks after we drop off the coaches, shall we?
And from that, the two learned their lessons and were now best friends again.
Some friends or you'll be lonely. Once I was 7 years old.